Well, what's the Curiosity Project?
What are the three things you value most in life?
Well, that's a very easy question. No, well, one of them would certainly have to be creativity, just like the act of it. Personally, the what it brings to life, and as a way of connecting and expression and communication, and it's just a really important thing in my life. And I got to have it. I got to do it every day in different kinds of ways. I don't know. Another would probably be love. I just feel like that is just so essential to being a human, and orientation, and just it powers us and moves us, and it's the best way to like understand the world. And I don't know, this may be like a subset of creativity, or maybe a combination of creativity and love. I don't know, but like creative rapport, which I guess is sort of like collaboration, like the creative flow moment where you are just jamming with somebody, or multiple somebodies, and you're all on the same wavelength, and things are just happening in a very organic, beautiful, perfect way. That is the best to me.
Tell me a memory which shaped you.
I don't know. I mean, it's many different memories, but thinking of one that was really important to me, informative as a artist, as a creative person, was in undergrad, and it was an early painting class that I took. We were making big oil paintings, and it could be whatever you wanted, type of thing, but you just had to bring in a painting to the critique. So it was like my first critique, and I had made this painting of a guy, just kind of, it was actually from a figure model. It was this nude guy, sitting with his hand on his chin, and was really trying to do a good job, make a really good painting, and I had kind of like thought about it a lot, and I think I was kind of grappling with the idea of meanings in art, or communicating stuff, or kind of what art even is, or how it exists. And I had made this whole story about who this guy was, what the painting was, and all the symbols and stuff that I put in there in a kind of vague way as I was sort of exploring what I was making. I took it to class, and in the critique, it was clear that like none of that came through, was irrelevant to the existence of the piece, because I was just immediately like, oh, like it's not just about what I'm putting into it, it's also about what it's coming out from it, and how it's perceived. And like a painting hangs on a wall or a gallery or whatever, and someone can walk up to it and take something from it. But I don't know, it was just a valuable lesson that the art is not just about you. The art is a dialogue with you, or the makers of the art, and the people that receive it, and that is like the kind of cornerstone of it, in a way that's super important. And I that was an important, really kind of embarrassing and intense critique, which was good, and it kind of helped me realize, like, oh, like this is what's actually happening when I make a painting or whatever.
What's your favorite color?
Lately, I really like teal, kind of southwestern blue-green.
Tell me in as much detail as you can about something you knew of which once existed and now does not.
I made a short film in grad school about a Chalcolithic man, this ice mummy that was found in the Italian Alps in the 90s, and he's from like 5,000 years ago. This guy that's dead, mummified.
I hope he's dead.
Yeah, very dead. He's mummified, and he had all this accoutrement with him and stuff. It's just really interesting story. He's called Otzi the Iceman. You can Google him if you want to. But anyway, I made a film about him, and in the process of that, I started to try and kind of learn about his experience. And so I started trying to teach myself like flint knapping, and I made leather, with like pig brains and smoke and all this stuff. I tried to kind of tap into this experience, this very tactile kind of version of this experience. And in the process of that, I just learned a tiny bit about flint knapping compared to people that do it. It just made me realize, like, there's so much knowledge about things like making a tool from a stone, or just how to like be in a world that is not this world, that is like completely lost from us, and we can only just go back and try and piece it together, and try and practice that kind of stuff to learn it. But it's just really kind of mind blowing when you realize like how much we know versus how much we may have lost as humans over the years.
What, if anything, is perfect?
Yeah, tough question. I mean, as a designer, it's really hard to ever feel like that you've perfected anything. You always kind of want to go back and make little tweaks or nudge something to the right or the left or slightly change the color or whatever. But at some point you just have to kind of stop because you're like as close to it as you can be. I think the only things that can be perfect are things that are fleeting. They're things that are like moments that come and go, like that are improvised or that are just like little gestures or making someone laugh or telling a joke at the perfect time or whatever. Like those kind of things can be perfect, but nothing tangible maybe.
Who is your favorite character from fiction of any kind?
I think maybe that's a tough one. Not that most of these are pretty tough, I guess, but maybe Cody from Visions of Cody. It's this Jack Kerouac book. He's based off Neil Cassidy, a real person. So I guess it sort of skirts the line of whether or not it's fiction, but it's just such a wild, interesting, intense vision of a person.
What fascinates you?
I'm a pretty curious person, I think. I think that's definitely a quality that I have. And the things that catch my curiosity are things that change my perception of reality or take me to some other place or somehow kind of break the rules, something like that.
What other job would you like to do if you weren't doing this?
I don't know. It's an interesting thing because day to day trying to decide like, well, what should I be doing or what makes me happy? And I certainly enjoy the job that I have on Dimension 20 because it's a mix of head work, computer work kind of stuff, drawing, and then very physical construction and getting my hands dirty and stuff. So something like that. I don't know. I mean, I guess if it could be any job, maybe like some kind of like, it seems like not really a job that exists anymore, but like some kind of like explorer or, moving. And
so is it like a frontiersman?
Maybe so, yeah.
What is your most prized physical possession?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think I have necessarily one thing that is probably most prized. I would say that most valuable to me or prized in like an existential way is just having a knife. I just always have a knife or even two knives on me just as a tool, like I use it all the time and especially in my work and just the way that I move through the world. And I feel kind of almost, less functional if I don't have some kind of like little pocket knife or something that in me. So
if you could name a hot sauce, what would you call it and why?
If I could name a hot sauce, maybe hot shit.
Why?
I don't know. It just seems like give me the hot shit.
When was the first time that you started making models and how did you even get into that industry?
I definitely wasn't professionally making any models until this show, until working on Dimension 20. I come from a film and TV background as a production designer mainly, and was building in full size stuff like big sets and props and things like that. And my learning kind of happened on the fly, and I was lucky enough and maybe smart enough to hire people that are more talented than me and make things look cool and also kind of teach me along the way. So it's sort of like been an exploration. It continues to be, a thing that I just keep trying to grow and evolve.
How did you get into production design then?
Well, I studied fine art in undergrad, and I didn't really want to be like a gallery artist. So I moved to New York, and I was, a buddy was living up there, a couple buddies, and I worked at this store selling computers. I was just kind of trying to figure things out, and I heard that there was this thing you could be called a production assistant for TV and film, which meant that you like help them. And I didn't even know really what it was, but I knew that like that sounded better than selling computers. So I just hustled and asked a bunch of people on the internet if I could work for free and all this sort of thing. And it was awesome. And after like a month or two of that kind of stuff, I was getting calls and having to turn down work. And I was like, oh, this film production is so awesome. It's this collaborative, creative, like clandestine thing where you're working behind the scenes to make this thing all together that, no one who's not really there or understands how it works would even be able to kind of appreciate or understand what is happening. But, you're working these long hours and doing all this crazy stuff. So I just liked it right away. And then I gravitated towards, the art department side of stuff because, I have a background in visual arts and and also kind of in construction, so I got into set building and joined the union as a carpenter, moved back to Texas. And then I just started production designing. I started making things with friends and small projects. And so I've worked in film, I think, for maybe 15 years or so now, just about.
What would the first day on a job of a set design and production assistant actually be? Is it like tuning costumes? Is it making sure sets are orchestrated the correct way?
Anytime any production happens, whether it's a commercial or a music video or a feature film or a TV show or whatever, it's like this kind of miraculous symphony that happens. So and it only happens for this short period of time. It costs a lot of money and it involves a lot of people that are very skilled. And so it's like this orchestration of having all these things together in this one place, and they all know what the plan is, and they've all prepared, and they brought all the stuff they need, the costumes and the props and the cameras and the lenses and the lights, and they pull it all together in this short time frame and make this thing. That's kind of how filmmaking works. And if you're a production assistant, you're kind of like a little Swiss Army knife that you're used to kind of fill the gaps and fix problems and help the other people. So, I think my first day on that job, as a production assistant, I think I showed up really early in the morning, like 5 a.m. at a park in New York City. And there was a big motor home where the production office was. And they gave me $300 cash. And which was petty cash, but I didn't really understand at the time. But then it's like, they're like, go buy this, and so you hustle off and you got to go buy this thing and get the receipt and come back. And then they need it. And then they're like, go fill that ice chest up with water and go, help them with this thing or whatever. So you're just kind of like doing all the small tasks that also kind of make a production happen. And you're also getting to kind of see what's going on.
What was the process behind going from being the Swiss Army knife of making a set functional and being the glue that ties all of these creative people together to, we need you to make tiny miniature scale monsters that are going to be on camera and need to not only reflect light correctly, which I think is an underrated part of, they can't have like matte paint or anything like that. I've tried filming miniatures and putting them online before. That's difficult. How did that happen? How did that process of going from this production design to miniatures?
Well, I met with College Humor at the very beginning of Dimension 20 when they were still kind of figuring out what the show was, which was really exciting, because I was kind of involved in that process a bit and got to contribute and stuff. They knew that there was going to be an actual play D&D show, and there would need to be a set, and we could have some kind of miniatures, but it really wasn't focused around the miniatures at first. And so I kind of backdoored my way in, because I was, brought on to help them design and build a full-scale set, which we went through a couple of really different iterations. And then we started talking about miniatures, and I had recently got back into playing D&D and playing with miniatures and stuff. And so we did some test shoots and test games where we were trying to decide what the miniatures was going to be, how involved it would be, and all this kind of stuff. And I brought in a bunch of borrowed stuff from this game shop in Santa Monica that I went to a lot, and we did like a whole test shoot of the miniatures and like moving cameras through them, and then we were like, this is really cool, we should really lean into the miniature side of it. So then I just had to get really good at that miniature stuff, because I knew that it was I was already really excited about it and whatever. But that's sort of what a production designer does anyway, is that you have to sort of become an expert in whatever field it is that your show is about. If your show is about dog shows, and you're designing a movie about dog shows, then you've got to know a lot about dog shows to be able to do a good job designing it. So it's sort of part of being a production designer is kind of steeping yourself in whatever world and sort of morphing into that, being an expert in that area to be able to do it.
What was your first encounter with D&D?
I think my first encounter with D&D, I was a kid, probably grade school kid, and I think, I don't know if I saw it somewhere or something, but I asked my mom if we could get this Dungeons and Dragons game, and she was like, I grew up in rural Texas, and she was like, oh no, you're not playing Dungeons and Dragons. I think it was like post Satanic Panic, and not that we were like super religious, just kind of fearful type of thing that was the reaction. So So then D&D became like a forbidden fruit for me that I wasn't allowed to play. And we did get the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game, which is pretty cool. I played that with my brother. And then in high school art class, one of my friends had the Dark Sun box set. And so he brought like this binder in that had like all the stuff from there. And in art class, I would voraciously read. It was just so neat and cool. And in college, I got to play in my dorm. I got to play in a really epic second edition game, where we stayed up all night and all this stuff. It was a lot of fun. And so that kind of sealed the deal for me. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I was in. And then for a long time, I kind of fell out of playing D&D or just playing any role-playing games, just between work and other things. And then, I always, even though I didn't play, kind of a lot of my friends weren't really into tabletop role-playing games, but I was like still buying the books and reading them alone, and eventually I think pretty early on, I was like trying to find actual play audio, like before even there was like podcasts. I remember like trying to search the internet, like where can I listen to people playing D&D, because I'm just so thirsty to connect to that. And anyway, I got back into it kind of a little after 5e came out, and I started playing again, and I've ran a number of campaigns, and now I play online in a Patreon Dark Sun 5e game. So I'm kind of living my best life getting to play this game that I discovered in high school. And then I really like the Zweihander system. And so I run a couple of Zweihander campaigns for friends and family and stuff. It was just like this really amazing fantasy world that had all these like organized and systematic kind of details and things, but I had no clue of like how D&D actually worked or anything. But it's cool. Like the books themselves are just cool manifestations of some kind of type of creativity that is cool, unique.
You can tell that there's a lot of passion gone into it. Like I remember when I was reading Planescape for the first time, seeing all these different worlds lined up, and I was like, I wonder, did they ever write any books in here? And I used to write my own stories set in this world. I didn't even know it was D&D, and I was just like, yeah, this is awesome. What was the first miniature that you had to design for Dimension 20?
Yeah, so kind of the first season, I mean, for me, like I pretty much do all of my work before they even shoot the show. So I know what all the battles are, I know what all the monsters and all this stuff. So it all happens ahead of time. And so, I get like, or I build like a whole, list and of all the things we're going to have to create. So for the first season of Dimension 20 Fantasy High, that was kind of, you see there all the things that we had to figure out. And our kind of mantra has always been like whatever gets the job done, because Brennan and the cast are always throwing such things that are so delightfully like outside the kind of like D&D norm. It's kind of like a hallmark of the show that it's a real challenge to manifest a mini for whatever it is, and so in that first season it was kind of exploring what all the options were first, and then trying to figure out what is the best way to accomplish whatever task or whatever miniature build. So really quickly, it was like, okay, we can use Hero Forge, which is fantastic to create minis. And we have a local person in LA that prints them for us really fast and high quality that we work with. So that can do a lot of things. And then, another aspect is just kind of brute force looking online through catalogs of miniatures, just trying to see what's available, because there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of different miniatures out there. And there might be just the perfect one, which is great for us because it's cost effective and it's already done. More times than not, I'm looking for like pieces, like, oh, that little head, I can take that and cut it off and we can attach it to this body, and then we can put the legs of this other one on there. And so a lot of kit bashing.
Yeah, so for the people who wouldn't be aware of what kit bashing is, what is kit bashing?
Kit bashing is when you combine two or more models or miniatures together to kind of create something new. And a perfect example would be, and this is a spoiler for the first season of Fantasy High, but at one point they fight some skater dwarves. And so, in as far as miniatures that exist out there, there are not skater dwarves that I know.
I'm shocked.
There may be now, or there may have been some I just missed, but I couldn't find them. But what I did find was skaters. They're like little kids, that are they're kind of modern, contemporary era kids on skateboards. And we found there's plenty of dwarves. So we had dwarves for like the arms and the shields and swords and things like that. And then I got some caveman heads that had these kind of big bearded heads. And so we cut those pieces apart, cut the heads off of this, the body off of that, cut the knees off the legs, etc., and then glue them all together and paint them up and make a new miniature that is what we want it to be.
What is the fastest turnaround in any miniatures that you've had to make? Because I know on the show, as the cast kind of bounces ideas off one another and prepare to encounter things, have you ever had to like last minute, we'll have to make this because this is cool?
Yeah, because we do most of our work ahead of time, we don't, and a lot of time like they're shooting back-to-back episodes on the same day, or even 3 episodes on a day, or sometimes it's like 3 episodes one day, 3 episodes the next day, which is very, very little time for us to produce something. In season 1, famously, like Fabian catches this motorcycle or captures, dominates, whatever. He takes possession of this motorcycle. So now he's got a motorcycle, and then Brennan is like, after the I'm watching them tape it, and was oh man, we need a motorcycle mini. And then of course Brennan comes up and is like, hey, we need a motorcycle mini. And I'm like, yeah, but we also need a mini with him on the motorcycle, and we need him a mini of the motorcycle by itself. He's like, oh yeah, so that's 2 minis. And so then that one, I think we did it in like 2 days or 3 days or something. It was a Hero Forge mini with some kit bashing. The fastest though is probably in Tiny Heist. There's I think she's kind of like the love interest of the main villain. Her name is Minetta, I think. So we never created a mini for her because we can't create minis for everything, and so we kind of have to make tough decisions with the budget and stuff, being like, well, which ones will we make? And so we just say, well, I don't think she's going to actually be any battles. We can get away with not making a mini of her. But then it became clear, while we were taping that, like, oh, we really should have a Minetta mini, and that was one of those. The Tiny Heist season was taped over 2 days, like all 6 episodes was taped over 2 days, 1 weekend, and it was like midday, so I'm like, okay, I'm calling my crew, like I got to send somebody out to. I had to find a ballerina, like toy ballerina thing, send someone out to pick it up, bring it right back to the shop. Then we had to like paint it, touch it up, make some changes, put it on a base, bring it in, and so it just barely made it in time. But that was pretty quick. That was like a same day turnaround.
So with each season of Dimension 20, the ideas and concepts that the show deals with kind of grow and scale, especially with this current season of Crown of Candy. You've got like this essentially fantasy almost. So the players are looking at this world so like richly constructed. And when you're planning out each season, are you cognizant that things are getting bigger? And is that an intentional choice, or is it just that you feel more comfortable in these bigger spaces now?
I think it's probably both. I mean, we certainly are getting better at what we do, and it's just like anything else. Like I feel like everything is about figuring out tricks that you can put in your little toolbox, and then it's So one time you have an issue where you're trying to figure out skater dwarves, and then the next time you encounter something like that, you're like, oh, we could use the skater dwarf trick that we did, or we could whatever. So you get faster and more efficient and better at it, and of course we're always trying to. I think that's kind of a hallmark of D20 is that we're always kind of trying to build on what we did or one up what we've done. just even with like the concepts for the battles, but it's certainly with the visual scope of it. And also it goes to the world that it is, that particular world feels like it has this kind of implied scope, which is to say all of the food groups. And so you immediately want to represent all of those in some way, so that you can sort of like be like, oh yeah, that's what the bread world looks like. And that's what this looks like. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess all of those reasons.
2 questions. Do you put Easter eggs in your sets and models? And what is your favorite Easter egg that you've put in, if so?
Probably the model makers put in more Easter eggs than I do, just because they're kind of the feet on the ground, and I have a lot of other things on my plate usually. But yeah, we always try to. I think one of them is in every season they used an actual like plastic egg shape as like a structural element for something. I'd have to ask them, and I don't think that one's ever been brought up. But I think in each of the seasons there's some, whether it's like a small like plastic egg or like a big half egg shape. And I know in like season 1, kind of keeping with like the high school juvenile humor aesthetic, we put a lot of like dicks in. So there's like, places where it's like, hey, that looks like a dick. Awesome. Perfect. But yeah, I mean, we're having fun when we're making this stuff. And sometimes sometimes we'll come up with something. It's like, oh, this is great. And it's like, it's going to be too distracting. It's kind of a lesson we learned, is that, the set and the minis are actually a active participant in the improvisation that's happening with the cast, and the set is telling the cast stuff, and everything that's in there has to be thought of in that light, because you don't want to reveal anything like where a secret door is or whatever, or it's got to be really thoughtfully looked at as to how and what exactly it is telling the cast. So, you have to be careful about what superfluous things you put in there.
You seem to enjoy from the descriptions making this stuff and making all of this happen. And the cast enjoys playing D&D. Brennan enjoys dungeon mastering. And the people who are watching enjoy watching all of that happen. So what is this thing we call fun?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. It's interesting too that each one of those things that you brought up are actually different manifestations or instances of the show. You know what I mean? Like me and Brennan and the producers sitting in a room coming up with ideas for battles and laughing about stuff, whatever that is. And then us, that's one time that it exists. And then us, like, physically building these things in the shop, and they exist for us in this world, which is based on what has already been discussed. That's a moment that exists, that it is enjoyed. And then it goes and it is in the actual taping of the show where there's so much additional things added to it, and things that we designed to be a certain way, they end up being used or defined a different way, and there's a whole other level of layer where it exists. And then it's actually goes through post, right? So they're putting sound effects and other things, and the editors and the post team is having fun kind of taking what's there and lifting up another layer, and then people watch it, right? And they're interacting and jamming about it and making art and stories and whatever, and it exists I guess that's probably the final time that it exists. But anyway, it's just kind of interesting to say, I don't know what fun is, but it's interesting that you brought up that each one of those is like a different time that fun is had in the creation and enjoyment of the show.
So then, is fun a process that perhaps from the very beginning, with the intent of making something, you begin to enjoy it, and through that enjoyment, you give cues to the next person, like a wave, to continuously expand that fun, because each person who watches Dimension 20 as well I think it would even go a level of abstraction higher, in that each person who enjoys Dimension 20 will do so for a different reason, will have fun for a different reason.
Well, it exists for them almost it exists for each viewer almost as a parallel universe in a way, kind of, where they're having their own, ships and whatever, yeah, I don't know. I think you're right. I think that there is something to that. It's like a collaboration. It's each time there's a little dialogue or a little dialectical communication happening. Yeah,